very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain. So,
good morning. I'm Neota Ibe.
From Lagos, good morning. I am Bukola Koka.
Today is July 6th. It's a Thursday morning. Yes, we're keeping the count down to December 25. Yeah, it's not too early. Amaya Makinde, good morning and welcome.
Just was me.
Well, they're looking at themselves. It's okay. Go ahead. But, you know, one of the things that, we continue to count, which is not pleasant. Yesterday we were counting some numbers. We were counting the number of houses, at Trade Mall that were having issues that are being lined up for one form of, attention by the FCDA or not, and a number of other things that we've been speaking about over time. But this time around, that issue of flooding is not only something that is restricted to Treadmore. Needless to say, we are not unaware that since November or December of last year, NEMA already raised the alarm that a sizable number of states, about 32 states in all, and about 178 local government areas are at risk of flooding one way or the other. Glad to know that yesterday the Senate waded in and made their own input in that by raising that issue, asking the federal government to find lasting solutions to the flooding problem, one of which resolution was for the government to build dams where necessary, particularly the specific Hausa Dam somewhere up north, which floods areas such as Lagos, Ogun, and Kwara states in particular, which are said to likely witness coastal flooding due to the tidal lock of the Ogun River by Lagos Lagoon from a natural rise in sea level, coupled with the possible release of excessive water from the Onya Dam. That and several other communities in Ogun, Kwara, and a number of other places all over the country are at risk one way or the other. The question is, how soon will this get the intervention that is necessary? It is something already troubling. It's not something we are unaware of. The question is, are we going to wait until something happens before we react? Or we take proactive steps now? Is it too late to do anything to ensure that at least we can save some lives and property before these things happen? Senate is speaking. Who is listening? Nigerians, at the end of the day, are the ones who tend to bear the brunt. Buki.
Yes, indeed, the other day we were talking about the consequences of flooding, and we recall the 2022 flood during which those states of the Federation, we can't forget in a hurry, Anambra, Delta, Kogi in particular, and Bayelsa, that coastal state, how they were submerged in flooding. And, recall those vivid images of those houses that were practically swallowed up. And the state, the squalid state of our camps, internally displaced persons camp, came to light. But, at the tail end of the last administration, there was a presidential committee on flooding that was constituted that recommended quite a number of things, mitigation, particularly the constitution of a National Council on Flood Management that also advised government on long-term actions, for instance, building of more dams to mitigate flooding. And, it was instructive. Kayode also reminded us when we talked about this the last time, that the committee noted that we spent more on managing the consequences of flooding than prevention. To be specific, the committee recommended 3.4 trillion naira to mitigate flooding, but we lost, guess what, $6.68 billion to consequences of flood in 2022. So it's cheaper, to mitigate flooding than to manage the consequences of flood. Look at the amount the Nigerians spent, on, IDP camps, resettling people, not to talk of the number of persons lost to flooding. So the recommendations are out there, and the work is cut out for the current administration to take it up and constitute that Council on Management of Flooding, such that we don't have a repeat of what we experienced last year.
That's
Guys,
not to say that the states are absolved in any way, manner, shape, or form. Every state that has been notified that these things will happen, you already are the ones closer to these people, especially at the local government level. Do we have to wait for the federal government all the time? Guys.
Floods are predictable. And fortunately for us, the agencies that sort of like warn us about the weather and have already said these things. Indeed, you guys have talked about it since December. NIMET, the hydrological agencies, they've all talked about these things, but how prepared are we? When I say floods are predictable, it's such that when when people continue to pile trash in the drainage channels, what happens is you're sure that area is bound to get flooded. If there are water channels, or the way the earth is such that there are natural drainage channels. Natural. You find out that upland here, down there is a drainage channel naturally. But guess what we do many times? So we enjoy our upland and then we fill up the lowland and extend into the lowland, reducing the space for the water to flow through. That's on one side. The other side is to go to where the water bodies are supposed to be, where nature has said this area is water. So allow water to have its space. We go there, fill it up, reclaim that land, and build our houses. And we forget one thing. Yes, it was a fella that sang a song, say, water no get enemy. But the truth is this, when you take water space, after a while, water will seek back its space unless you give it a different channel where it can find. Because water would always find its space. It would always seek for opportunity or ways to move. So if you occupy everywhere, what happens? I mean, growing up, we used to play some kind of games in the village where we say we are cooking. So you carry sand, you're pouring into a tin. And as you're pouring in, the water level is increasing. You're pouring into and the water level is increasing. The more the water channels are silted or filled up with trash or whatever it is, the water levels around will continue to rise. And as they continue to rise, yes, we're talking climate change. I'm not even talking about climate change here. Yes, we're having more rains than normal. We've been warned about this. But we're filling up the water channels for one reason or the other, either with trash or for the purposes of building houses for ourselves. What happens is water levels will continue to rise. And obviously, they're not evaporating fast enough to say, okay, the waters will evaporate. And when they do evaporate, the clouds get filled and the water comes back down. So we need to give water its space so that water can give us our own space. And the fastest way to do that, yes, we're talking about building dams. When you finish building the dams, if the other water channels are not dredged, are not dug up, and the trash removed or whatever it is we use to fill it is removed, we'll still come back to have this conversation again.
You know, that's why I was just thinking, look, what is it that was deliberated upon or said on the floor of the Senate yesterday that is kind of new? You know, I'm just wondering because yesterday, the motion was moved by Senator Gbenga Daniel, who's a former governor, along with Senator Umar Sadiq. President of the Senate is a former governor himself. And then Senator Devumai also spoke there, also a former governor.
Incidentally, at least two of the people that spoke there about this matter are engineers.
So you see, and then and they have been in that position where they have at least a great idea in terms of how they grappled with it in their states. What could have gone wrong? What is it that they think that the federal government can do? What kind of assistance can federal government render? Because we know that Anambra State governor, remember when it was flooded, and then they said, look, states cannot handle this kind of scenario. Then they came up with, what was that yardstick for states that were affected. Clearly, we saw that it was just papering over cracks, nothing really, no solution whatsoever. Because now the Senate is warning. In fact, Senator Daniel was saying, look, when the rain started in September to to October? And I thought, okay, it's already here. It's already pouring, and so we need to act
That is
quick.
what they call the double peak.
Yeah.
At the sudden, there's the August break. Then what comes in September is usually like the peak of the rainy season.
Yeah,
so.
but the rain's already here. We're seeing the effects already, bottom line. Because at the end of the day, yes, they did say the MDAs, relevant MDAs, need to release funds to build canals and several other things. But, you know, in 2018, almost the same scenario played out. The same Senate also, I think at that time it was about 108 of the senators who said, look, they all adopted that motion saying, this, we're all in this, sponsoring this. Something needs to be done urgently. 2018, now we're saying the same thing. So I hope it's not just us all just talking and just not walking the talk. And so, because I mean, we've done a lot of talking. I think it's just time for us to act. Perhaps this may be one of those areas where many will look to the National Assembly and see if they follow through with whatever it is that they've suggested or they intend to do about all of this. Because, look, we can't afford to be just talking heads because lives are involved here. So right from the planning stage, the approvals you give to whoever builds what, where do they build it? Is it on a floodplain? All of those agencies have got to play their roles, because if you cut corners, these are the kind of things that comes back, and it doesn't just bite, it sweeps several things off. And then, had I known, we can't afford to just, we need proper planning and execution to ensure that we don't keep funding and wasting money when we could have done things right from the get-go. All right, let's just go right ahead and take a look at some of the dailies here for you. The Guardian, that's the one we're starting with here today. And it's a stark reminder of what stares us in the face. Forex scarcity and Naira devaluation. Perhaps one as a result of some of the policies of this current administration. So you get to see trouble in health sector as drugs, cost of care spike by, look at that, 150%. So you can imagine, because you already had people who couldn't afford it in the first place. And then you have the National Agency for Food, Drug Administration and Control, because most times when you hear NAFTA talk, it's always about drugs and a lot less on food, because, look, the capacity is a question, it's a challenge. They need more. They need to boost their capacity, or even if you want to decentralize them, look, you focus on food, you focus on drugs, so you can have the kind of result that the country needs. But 150%, you can then imagine if you're pumped with fake substandard goods, fake drugs, because people couldn't afford the original, it's going to be a huge challenge. Coupled with that drain of professionals leaving the country, so you don't have access to the first-hand, first-class quality, at least to a large extent, because people who have to step up have also got their own challenges. So it's that's what we see here on the front page. It says average cost of treatment up by 60% to 150% in 2 months. And this is along with the challenges that the country has to grapple with medical care, professional medical care, where several medical facilities you access don't even have the basic things to, I mean, people always tell us, look, just be careful, just pray and hope, even though that's what you can do, that you don't get into an emergency, a medical emergency in this country, because if you do, then you could see some things for yourself. Hopefully it doesn't amount to that. But that's a big lead on the front page here for The Guardian. And then you get to see this tucked away somewhere. Akpabio under pressure, faces uproar over uneven distribution of 500 billion naira loan to SMEs. So, I know we'll talk about flooding and rain, but I guess it doesn't pour in the Senate. It doesn't rain, it pours now already, with the President of the Senate facing uproar. Who knows? That's The Guardian this morning, guys.
So talking about leading by example, I have the... Let's hope that the Senate is able to handle its issues. Him being a former governor and all, many of them, his colleagues, so they'll work it out. But they should know, like someone reminded us yesterday, that they're employed by the people to serve the people. Hopefully, they'll do a good service and ensure that those agencies, especially the Ecological Fund, I mean, that's where they're all looking at. But let's look at leadership, and they are leading with this one, politics. NAS principal officers, Adamu runs to Villa as NWC members allege disloyalty.
Oh, dear.
Page 4 is where you continue with details of that story. But see, the writers go and make peace with Akpabio Abbas, APC governors tell national chairman. Is that an advice? Would he heed the advice? And then the Minority Caucus says, we breached no law, says Senate Minority Caucus. Go to page 4 and get more details on that. The intrigues of politicking. I thought that after the principal officers, the Senate President and the Speaker emerged, that all the intrigues will pipe down a little bit and let's get down to say, okay, this person knows, will handle this better. But hey, who knows? Above that story, Hub Tribunal, APC closes case, says no need flogging a dead horse. More details you'll find on page 7. And this one, banks raise ATM cash withdrawal limit to 200,000 naira. They had put a limit on withdrawals on the ATMs. I was just about to ask, before seeing this headline, I wanted to ask, what happened to the redesigned notes? I mean, it's like...
What do you mean? It's still there. Look at this one on the front page of Guardian. It looks like it.
Do you see circulation?
Well, I see some.
Because I see more of the old notes.
I see some. I still see some.
Okay.
When I move around, I see them. I still see some.
Okay. Well, maybe if you see some, pass it on to some of us.
Somebody else's property.
We're seeing old.
Pass somebody else's property to somebody else.
We're seeing old notes.
Could be
so let's see the new notes as redesigned and printed in circulation, more of that. But anyway, the banks have raised their cash withdrawal limits to 200,000. Someone was saying yesterday that they had issues withdrawing. You withdraw like twice from the ATM, they tell you you can't withdraw anymore. But well, let's hope that the ATM machines will be reprogrammed to cover for this 200,000 naira limits. And let's go up to the nameplate. Security issues. IGP redeploys 35 police commissioners in major shake-up. And on page 23, you get more details of that.
Did IGP speak about those images circulating? About those who were compelling people not to go to work?
I'm not sure he said anything specifically about that, but he said something about ensuring that the rule of law stands and those taking laws into their hands will be prosecuted. But hey, check page 23. Maybe I missed Muyiwa's comment, I don't know. Check page 23, you get more details. Muyiwa, please come and tell us more about what's going on in the Southeast. Oops. Then on page 6, fake UTME score. Lifts ban on Mesoma reps tell Jam. It's on page 6. And then down there you see the picture of the Secretary of Government of the Federation, and they're talking with the International Anti-Corruption Academy about some things. Well, let's leave it there. Oh, this one's a good one. Telecoms investments in Nigeria hit $75.6 billion. Interesting. Yet we still have dropped calls. Will that change real soon? Page 30 has more details, and we will leave it there for the leadership.
And turn to Daily Independent, which is quite a spread this morning with, a potpourri of stories. But let's begin with the big one, which focuses on the aviation sector. Downturn shrinks aviation as carriers' air traffic declines. Yes, indeed, during the festive period just concluded Eid celebration, return ticket was going for as high as 150 to 200,000, and we saw traffic thinning out in most airports in Nigeria. And the story is that even for international flights now, a lot more passengers take connecting flights to neighboring states just so that they can get cheaper flights. It's really, really sad, following the astronomical rise in jet A1 fuel for much of 2022. So what more interventions are possible in that sector? I believe the conversation will go on. But take a look at this one, also an outcome of deliberations at the Senate yesterday. It's at the bottom strip. Commotion at Senate over disbursement of 500 billion naira loan to SMEs. Ndume picked North got only 11%, while Lagos got 47%. That should interest you. The question is, do these funds really get to those that need it?
Very good question.
Yeah.
I think one of the questions to ask around that is the pipeline. I like the name Follow the Money.
Follow the money.
So who is supposed to do what?
What?
Are they at their desks? Are they paying attention to the things? Are the systems strong enough to monitor itself? Is the system strong enough to monitor itself and ensure that not just the instructions are not just given, but things are actually done to ensure that the needful, is done. Money is spent and seen to be spent the way it is expected to be spent.
It's the same way we hear that, the disbursement of funds under the Social Investment Program, 5,000 naira got to a number of people. Who are these people? Who are these people that were recipients of the funds?
Well, we know that there's a national
There's a need for the review of the accountability process in this country.
National social something register and all of that. But the question is, who really are the people there? We've heard, we are not unaware that we had some situation in which some people who are either not Nigerians or who are late were found on the INEC register. So how do we ascertain that that is not the same thing, has not happened as well? Yes, it's a conditional cash transfer. In other words, you're expected to have a phone number, an account number, and all of those. Bukola, it's a whole lot of things. So this thing called restructuring, it's a spread.
Yeah, so that's another aspect of work for the National Assembly, demanding accountability in the disbursement of a lot of these funds. There are quite a number of other stories on the front page of Daily Independent. Listen to this one. IGP orders deployment of 35 CPs, charges them on safety of citizens. We need to look a lot at that as well. We need the tiger in the IGP to roar on a lot of elements, non-state actors, particularly in the Southeast. We saw a video only moments ago where some students were being reprimanded for coming out during the Monday sit-at-home order in the Southeast. That is really heartbreaking. Those students were being flogged. So what's happening in the Southeast? Let's leave it there for the Daily Independent.
This Nigeria newspaper is saying exactly the same thing we opened with this morning, and it is talking about flooding. Yes, that's it, right there. Flooding, 14 states at risk. FG issues alert. Okay, so I guess the FG is also talking. Says 31 communities may witness heavy rainfall that could lead to flooding from July 4 to 8. Today is July 6. Just to remind you, the details of that you'll find on page 4. And look at that map. Those in red is where the states marked red are forecasted states at risk of flooding this year. The ones in yellow, no warning alert for now. You may want to read page 4 to find out exactly when this came out and who is making this on behalf of the federal government. Right under that graphic image you see there, PEPC, Tinubu APC closed defense in LPOB's objection. Star Witness, that's a writer, says Tinubu doesn't need FCT's 25% vote to win. The details of that you'll find on page 12 of the paper and several others this morning. Well, the issue we started, the first topic of yesterday, seems to have found its way to the House of Representatives. JAM versus Mesoma reps to investigate forgery of UTME results. Story is on page 7 of this Nigeria newspaper. That's the paper today.
Taking a look at Vanguard newspaper next. NAS principal officers. Adamu runs into stormy waters. How APC governors try to make Adamu retract his statement. 3 NWC members ditch Adamu, say NAS principal officers emerged after wide consultations. APC chairman Omishore meets Tinubu in Aso Rock. So all of that story. The writer is associated with that big lead and see how it plays out. It suggests, though, that he might be on his own on this one, but it's politics. So who knows? And then a little bit about security. I know some other dailies highlighted this bit. Sit at home, panic as gunmen attack residents, traders in Southeast. And so you'll be looking to see, okay, so Mr. IGP, this is for your attention and information. And then the National Security Advisor, this could threaten national security, so you expect that all of them will put heads together and rout such persons who seem to be taking laws into their hands that cannot be allowed to go on any further. And then about this oil and gas sector, fuel hike, other anti-poor policies, a declaration of war on workers' masses ascribed to the NLC. So I guess we might see if we could highlight this a little bit, if you will. Don't forget to check out the back page of Vanguard here today. It does have some interesting sports stories. You just calm frayed nerves if there are any such. That will be Vanguard this morning.
And we'll be looking at Daily Trust next. If you look at the picture on the front page of Daily Trust, you see there wading through the waters. Now, that's not Nigeria, though, but unless something's done, that might be the situation in some major parts of Nigeria, unless something is done real quick, flood waters. But above that, you have this lead. Tinubu meets Adamu Omishore, resolves rift over principal officers, endorses Akpabio Abbasi's actions, issue laid to rest, it's a family affair, national chairman speaks, president's men unhappy with chair, it's not about Adamu but North, ex-governor. Which ex-governor is saying that? Go to page 4 and find out more details on this story. That's the APC crisis. Tinubu meets Adamu. Let me show you. A few worry persist in aviation agencies over new directorates. Hopefully all the anger points here and there would ease out. But see, this one looks like it's easing off in Kwara State. Subsidy removal, Kwara reverses to 5 working days. They had reduced it to about 3. Now they're back to 5 working days.
I told you that some of those things were knee-jerk, not properly thought out. Now they've gone back. Who knows? Who's next?
Well, maybe it's an opportunity to rethink work ethics or not work ethics.
Before they announce it in the first
Come
place?
on now, we should borrow from the COVID period.
Borrow from what?
From the pandemic period. No, but they could have borrowed from the pandemic when a lot of people were forced to work from home. People were still working, but were working from home.
Yeah, but if you're borrowing, now you change your mind. So no more, then we'll go back to... Is that how they borrow?
When you borrow, you have to return. So that's what they did. They borrowed and they returned.
It needs to be properly thought out.
No, indeed. Well, page 7 will tell you more about that. Dismissal from APC, Goje appeals judgment, files stay of execution. You see more of that on page 6. But this one, forgery. Mesoma makes U-turn, admits scoring 249 in JAM. Well, you got to read this. That story about the telecoms investment. But this time, okay, in Naira, telecom investment in Nigeria hits 56.7 trillion Naira. That's coming from Dambata. The ears at the NCC. And finally, this $1 videos forensic analysis has exposed Ganduje. The anti-graft agency in Kanu is speaking there. Well, let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
And take a very quick look at the Nigerian News Direct, which is what I have next for you. And it leads with that big one from the presidential villa yesterday. Gas supply. Tinubu endorses $5 billion LNG floating project. Targets 300,000 tons of LPG annually. Project to kick off in 2026. And the last of the riders, estimated 7,000 direct jobs expected. Well, we'll be looking at that also a lot more for you in the course of the program. Going to the bottom strip, you find some other interesting stories as well. FCCPC threatens to sanction airing POS operators over high charges. The question is, how far-reaching can those sanctions go? How wide, can their monitoring team cover in many parts of the country where they're charging as high as 500 naira for 5,000 naira, 1,000 naira for 10,000 naira, taking us back to the days of the, harsh consequences of the Naira redesign policy?
Well, they have an association, mobile operators. I don't know what the name is now. Say that look, their own price increase is with the intention to remain in business, but then there is also the job of the CBN to monitor this, and thankfully the FCCPC is playing its own role as well. The question is, who do we listen to? During the time that you referenced, people were desperate to get things done. I know someone who paid 40,000 naira to get 60,000 naira, and business had to go on. Of course, where is it coming back to? On the consumers, on the people that will patronize them.
So some people have decided to take advantage of, that time and not return to status quo. We hope that something will be done about that. There are some more stories. FG targets 553 billion naira from petroleum unremitted shipping taxes. That's another one for you to think about. How long has this gone on for? 553 billion naira unremitted taxes. That's quite a lot of money. But we won't exit Nigerian News Direct without reviewing this one. Encomiums pouring for Nigerian News Direct publisher Dr. Samuel Ibiemi, who passed on about 2 days ago, I believe. The work of the Nigerian News Direct doesn't pay enough testament to his work in the journalism profession. He'll be sorely missed. Let's leave it there for the Nigerian News Direct.
And with that, we end a look at the papers this morning, but not... Right after this break, it's time for us to take on the issues as they come, so do stay with us.
After President Bola Tinubu put a halt to the removal of fuel subsidy in the country, attention is apparently zeroed in on gas for succor and as a sustainable energy divergence. It is for this reason that the president began his day by receiving investors from the natural and petroleum gas sectors in the State House. The investors, accompanied by the ambassador of France and deputy ambassador of Japan to Nigeria, wanted the president's backing for a floating liquefied natural gas plant, which could crash the cost of gas in the country.
Are you guys good?
The president, according to a statement released by the presidential spokesperson, Mr. Dele Alaki, says when the facility gets upstream by the fourth quarter of 2026, it would process 1.5 million metric tons of liquefied natural gas for foreign market and produce 300,000 metric tons of liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, for domestic use. The investors reaffirmed their commitment to help Nigeria shore up her liquefied petroleum gas production capacity.
We've signed a $5 billion with Afreximbank for multiple floating LNG projects. Afreximbank is working on the financials and is aggregating both the debt and equity for this project. This project alone will deliver 25% of the requirement of LPG in country Nigeria. On the part of job creation, this project has the ability to create 7,000 jobs for Nigeria.
Welcome back. Yes, indeed. We're talking about the oil and gas industry. That sector, yeah, it does affect a lot of things in this country. As you can see, Mr. Olu Adeosun joins us. He is the chairman of MOMAN, that's Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so in this sector, there's quite a few things that will just need explanation, your explanation being in that industry and a player there. So let's start off with this one. I mean, if people hear 7,000 jobs, of course, who doesn't want more jobs created? But it's also coming as probably part of policies by this administration in that sector to see how they could get things going. But we know fuel subsidy, its attendant effects on one hand and this on the other. So tell us, give us your impression about this particular one now, because, I mean, when they tell us it's a first time we're getting an indigenous company also being involved here, what are the implications of this, I mean, to the average person out in terms of the benefits?
Thank you very much. So, I mean, first of all, it has to be commended that an indigenous company has managed to sign an agreement, or at least an MOU, that suggests that a floating LNG storage facility will be built in Nigeria. The closest example we have of something similar in the region is the Kribi floating LNG terminal in Cameroon. It is about 1.2 million tons per annum, and I think it was done at a cost of about $1.2 billion. So hearing that there's a $5 billion investment is quite interesting. From a localized point of view, I agree with the employment discussion. It will certainly create employment because you'll need Nigerians to run the project, and you'll also need Nigerians to operate it as a going concern. There are still some details that we need to hear. I mean, first of all, what we've heard so far is just the headline. We all know that there are some underlying issues with gas gathering and regasification centers in Nigeria. So first of all, that infrastructure will need to be developed in parallel. Secondly, I think that it's obvious that Nigeria also today does not consume that much LNG. It is not a gas that has historically been used in Nigeria. The Egbin terminal, for instance, I think received about 1.5 cargoes over the past year on a per annum basis. So what this suggests is that there is an export opportunity here, unless, of course, some of these considerations, which include security as well, are dealt with. So it suggests that the focus here might be for export. But it's really hard to make a valid and considered judgment off the back of a headline. But it's really commendable that the investment opportunities are starting to roll in, and we're starting to see real projects that have global impact created here in Nigeria.
Right. So what are those other items that you say or you expect them to explain a little further so people can have deeper understanding of the implications of this particular policy?
Sure, Chamberlain. So, I mean, one of the things that plagues the industry is really around gas gathering. There are we know we have an abundance of gas as a country. Yeah. But we need to aggregate that gas in such a way that it can flow steadily and consistently into the compression or the cooling terminals for the LNG to actually be created. We need to create that infrastructure. It doesn't exist today. So there needs to be a considered and deliberate framework for pulling these things across. The other issue is one that is very well known, and it's security. And it's something that we'll probably talk about over the course of today. It's security. You have a floating LNG station that's slightly offshore. You will need to make sure that security is addressed at a national level. Again, we're very good. We're very positive about the news of the appointment of the new security boss, and we hope that there'll be a lot more done in that space because it really impacts not just LNG, but it also impacts our crude oil production as well. Then there is the matter of the demand. As I said, it's a problem, it's a problem or an opportunity. We need to find industries such as the power sectors that really use LNG, but to make that happen, we need to create the framework for transportation across the country. So you need pipelines that can take LNG. Now, I hear a 2026 date. Even if we had another factor, of 2 more years, by 2027, if there is a deliberate and focused way of dealing with this, of addressing some of these issues in a constructive way, then it's possible that we can develop these other infrastructures and really create an opportunity for domestic use of LNG, as in other countries, as well as earn the effects that will come from the export of the product itself, as well as the job creation. From a marketer's point of view, if I could bring this home a little. Yeah. From a marketer's point of view, LNG is not a gas that we have historically traded in. We're a downstream retail business. What we have typically invested in is LPG, the liquefied petroleum gas, which is typically used as a cooking fuel. We believe that with LPG, we're in a position where we can actually use it as auto gas as well. It has been used in other countries. This is in addition to the discussions going on about CNG. So we believe that actually we're able to unify the specification of LPG for cooking and LPG for auto gas, then we really can leverage that investment that we have already made to drive down the cost of running transportation in the country. Again, this is in addition to the works and discussions ongoing with CNG. So from a marketer's point of view, we will have to take a right turn and really focus on the gases that we have made investments in.
So help shed a little more light on this for us. I mean, yes, they tell us that the processing and shipping or storage of this reduces the environmental footprint, but this doesn't need transport pipelines to get it to the shore. But you say there are issues of transportation. Could you explain that a little further?
Well, there are two steps to it, right? You would need to, this is a floating LNG plant, so there's got to be a framework or a mechanism for bringing the gas to the shore. Right, that's the first one. So that pipeline is fairly straightforward. But then to move the LNG from where it is, from the terminal where it's collected into the areas where it's going to be used, and this can be nationwide, right? You have power plants, you have other heavy industry that will use LNG as a fuel. Let's not forget the whole point of liquefying natural gas is to make it easy to transport. That's really it. Because when it gets to its destination, you will need to regasify it so it becomes a gas. And that's the format in which it is used for productivity.
Okay, so
you will,
yeah, go ahead.
So you will still need to create a network of pipelines that which you use to transport it from the terminal, the onshore terminal, into the various locations, which can be nationwide, where it's going to be used and regasified, and that infrastructure also needs to be created. And this is not cheap, right? Regasification plants are notoriously expensive, and they're LNG is one of the more expensive undertakings in the oil and gas industry.
So I know you spoke about. Oh, my apologies. I know you spoke about local players and bringing it back home a little, which we will much more. So how are local businesses, do they stand a chance? Are they going to benefit from this in the long or short term whatsoever?
I believe it's a long-term, it'll be a long-term benefit. The direct impact is that once this project gets signed and it moves from the appraise to the select to the definition phase, then it will create lots of opportunities. It will create capacity. LNG, as we know, is a very well-prized commodity globally. So there'll be all of that employment, but for Nigerians to really, truly benefit from it, at least at a headline level, we will need to make sure that we have other infrastructure components, which will require additional investment beyond the $5 billion that has been mentioned as part of for this very specific project. So we'll need to hear a bit more about it, Chamberlain. We'll need to understand it just a little bit more beyond the announcement that we've seen in the news over the last cycle.
Okay, Mr. Adeopshin, you've listed a couple of benefits that this will have on the nation, job creation, jobs will be created, the local businesses will get to benefit from it eventually. But when Nigerians, and many of them, hear that word, gas, the first thing that comes to mind is, come on, we're burning gas out there. So let's step back a little bit and break this down. This has nothing to do with the gas flaring situation we have in the Niger Delta that we'll continue to talk about, and how much money that can be made from that for the economy and the positive impacts on the environment, does it?
Well, it's all tied. So you recall I mentioned gas gathering. There has to be a collective framework for aggregating the gas from the various locations, right? If you don't start exploring an asset, an oil asset or a gas asset, you will not get the gas out. But once it comes out, you have to have a mechanism for collecting it Thankfully, under the PIA, we have, under the National Gas Flaring Program, we have an initiative, we have regulatory initiatives which actually enforce the gathering of this gas, but it needs to be done in such a way that all of those various gas sources are aggregated somehow, gathered, and then channeled through a pipeline to this LNG, to this floating LNG facility, or any other LNG facility for that matter, where it gets cooled down at very, very low temperatures into a liquid, and then it can then get pushed back out for commercial and industrial use.
While we're talking the technical and commercial matters here, there's the political will to see the implementation or the execution of this MOU that's being signed. The other side is also the benefits as they may be to the Nigerian people vis-a-vis the PIA that has been, and many still wonder how much of that law is being implemented to the fullest. Would that in any way help in seeing this through?
Absolutely, I think it would. So one of the ways to make something happen, so as you say, I completely agree, first of all, about the political will. This administration has set out straight out of the traps, and they are making very bold moves. I couldn't be prouder of the steps and the gains that are being made here. It's very clear that it's an investment-friendly administration. What we need to make sure that we're also cognizant of is the fact that some of these investments, people have to be incentivized to make them. And what the PIA does, and what the regulator, the authority, has also done, is that they have deployed both carrot and stick. Right? The stick in the sense of there are very clear guidelines on sanctions for gas flaring, for instance, or for misbehavior in the industry. So it's a combination of that the carrot and the stick that's really going to drive the right behaviors, first of all, so that we are able to really amass the gas in the quantities it's needed. I mean, it's the ratio of gas to liquid is about 600 to 1. So for every you need to gather 600 times the volume of gas to create like one unit of liquid. So it's quite a lot of gas that's required, and it would require everything: investments, sanctions, incentivization, all of that colluding together to create the right environment for productivity.
You see, that matter of sanctions brings to mind, again, the effectiveness of our regulations. The regulatory agencies that the PIA has put forward, one wonders how much of that has even has begun to work, because in layman's terms, the darkness around, or the murkiness around the petroleum industry in Nigeria is deep and really dark, and more light needs to be shed there before even this kind of investments, as good and lovely as they may sound, can even begin to take root as they should. What can be done immediately, so to speak, to see a little bit of more light in that area?
Chamberlain, first of all, I have to agree with you about the reputation of the industry, right? Whether deserved or not is debatable, but I have to agree with you because there has been a lot of secrecy and lack of transparency around it. But I can tell you that from what I've seen over the last 6 months, in terms of the authorities' desire and push for regulations, for clarity around the policy statements that are in the PIA, some of the early sanctions that I'm beginning to see, and the fact that the PIA, for the first time since it was gazetted in 2021, is now front and center, and it is the de facto playbook, if you like, for the industry. This has not been the case before. So we have to give it a chance. And if you go and look at the most recent publications by the authority, for instance, who is my industry regulator, you'll see that there is a lot of positivity in terms of what's being done. And I can assure you that companies are now being sanctioned. And as we move into this new world, the only way we're going to be, the new world is the PIA world, the only way that we're going to be able to hold players to account, and I know the authority is absolutely focused on this. The only way we're going to hold players to account is, first of all, to be very clear about the rules of the road. I can assure you that there will probably be a lot more revenue coming in, and I don't mean that in a cynical way at all, from sanctions and fines than there are for letting people get off. And we have no choice, but we have to believe that the PIA, given the prominence it has today and given the visibility it has today, is going to work.
Well, Mr. Adeosun, for the neophytes who have no idea what you're talking about, when you mention floating liquefied natural gas plants, when they hear LNG, for instance, their mind first of all goes to Nigeria LNG. So to hear that, okay, this is the first time we're having a project of this magnitude in Africa. It's a floating LNG plant project, but then Nigeria has an indigenous LNG organization called Nigeria LNG. What's the difference between the two?
Right. So, what's the difference between NLNG? NLNG, I believe, is a company that's owned by a consortium of IOCs, which including NNPC. I guess the celebration on this, and really I'm a downstream person, but the celebration of this particular this particular MOU is that it is something that's actually owned by and driven and sponsored by an indigenous player, right? So that for me would be the fundamental difference. Well, is that you have an indigenous player here.
Yeah, perhaps another significant or outstanding feature is that it's floating. What does that mean?
That means that it's offshore.
Okay.
Right. That means that it's not. It's somewhere, and we don't know what the distance out at sea it is. But it's floating. It's not connected to the shore. It means that a pipeline would need to be created to connect it to shore. It's not the first in Africa. Like I said, in Cameroon, Kribi, they have built an FLNG there as well, which has been operated successfully.
Which then raises the question whether or not we may or not have issues around host communities and all rise in this particular matter. Is there any risk to any community near or far?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure before the MOU was discussed and as part of their project feasibility studies, the promoters would have taken that into consideration. I mean, one of the things I mentioned earlier was security would also be a key consideration in the success of the project, and that is not something that any one company can do in particular, but it would be something that the government, in collaboration with the private sector, would need to address on a holistic basis, because it impacts not only this FLNG project, but it actually impacts our productivity as a country. The government has promised 4 million barrels a day on the horizon. We're currently at 1 point something because we're losing a lot of our productivity, our production to theft, vandalism, etc., etc. So security is a key consideration for any undertaking in the hydrocarbon space, particularly if they're operating along the coastline and in the Niger Delta area. So it needs to be addressed fundamentally. Otherwise, it will just be money down the drain.
Well, Mr. Adeosun, another issue of interest to me is the fact that the NNPCL seems to be very interested in gas in recent time. Well, of course, Nigeria LNG is more than 10 years old. This conversation around the floating liquefied natural gas project started in Nigeria more than a year ago. The conversation has been on for a while. But then there is also the Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline project. In terms of the involvement of the NNPCL in all of these, do you think the company is, do you agree or believe that the company is not biting too much at a particular time? Is it able to accommodate all of these in the interest of maximizing and exploring and exploiting all of the opportunities that Nigeria has in the gas space?
That's an interesting question. So I'm an outsider to NNPCL. I represent a private company. I also represent the Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria. We are very much interested in the downstream space. I I'm sure that any project that will be undertaken by NNPC will go through all of the rigors of a project planning of that scale, i.e., it'll go through an appraisal process, it'll go through a selection process, it'll go through a define in terms of what it hopes to achieve, it'll go into execution and hopefully operate. I am not sure I'm in a position to discuss on to opine on whether or not it's capable of doing it.
No, I'm aware of that, Mr. Rios. I just wanted to be, I mean, you're a Nigerian as well. Okay, so
okay.
It's from that perspective. Yes, it's from that perspective that I'm looking at it, particularly because now, I mean, look at the Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline, for instance, has involves about 14 African countries in the entire space, and that's quite a lot. So that's just the perspective.
Okay, so I can help you out with that. So that's very simple. Look, the PIA makes a provision for NNPC to be broken up into its discrete units, so companies specializing in various aspects. Once you have that done, then this issue of focus goes out the window, because you will then have a company that's focused exclusively on gas, and that is its mission. You have another company that's focused on pipeline. You have another company that will focus on something else. And all of this will be done not by NNPC alone or NNPCL alone, but in collaboration with other players, other investors, other sponsors. So I think then that burden and the risk sharing becomes more apparent, and it'll be less of an issue as we've in terms of focus and ability to execute because of multiple competing projects.
Well, Mr. Adeosun, still situating this investment within the context of the Petroleum Industry Act, what areas should we begin to look at in that act in terms of protecting the host communities? You know, in the past, we've heard indigents of communities protesting about citing, headquarters of major oil companies outside their location, and also protesting, the outsourcing of jobs that should come to their own people. So what areas of the PIA should we begin to look at within the context of the concern that we must protect our own, within those areas where those natural resources will be located?
Okay, so I can't cite the specific section within the Act, but there are provisions made for host communities within the Act. There is a host community fund that is set up, which is basically made up of members of the community. And the purpose of that funding is to do two things. It's one, to make sure that the interests of the host communities are protected, but it's also to incentivize those communities in terms of their ability, in terms of them being able to protect the assets that are placed along the littoral, in the littoral communities, such that there is very little, so that in the event of vandalism or anything like that, the host communities are the first point of contact and also the first point of accountability. I believe there are also provisions in that same act for employment. Now, I can't comment on whether or not the headquarters of companies would be situated in the host community areas, but I think it's incumbent on the communities as well to create environments that are conducive to all of these things that make a business interesting and make a business want to situate in those communities.
Interesting. Earlier, I also noted that you pointed out the low consumption rate of LNG within the country. But is it to say that Nigeria cannot begin to transit, particularly because of the low environmental footprint potential of LNG? And of course, there's also the industry requirements as well. So, and then I'd like you to also, if you can, tell us about the current potential of the production capacity of Nigeria for CNG, which is a huge, conversation now, particularly because of the removal of subsidy. So, what are the prospects in these areas?
Okay, so on the LNG side, I think I've said quite a few things there. Specifically, that there's low adoption. So a lot more work would need to be done in terms of creating the framework, the actual infrastructure required to move energy from one location to the other. Now, the major marketers and the downstream community have made investments specifically in two areas. In CNG, you have which is compressed natural gas, which also has a very clean output. The main outputs are carbon dioxide and water. So there's opportunity there. Now, many of us have invested in LPG, which is actually a gas that's good for both cooking and transportation as auto gas. The reasoning behind CNG and using gas as a transport fuel is very obvious. Nigeria has an abundance of gas. There's still a challenge around aggregating all that gas and getting it to where it needs to. If you speak to countries that have an abundance of gas as well as pipelines, they're not necessarily using CNG. Now, there's an interesting point that people may not know. LPG as a fuel has more energy content per liter, almost 3 times, than gasoline, right? A lot of investment has already been made in the downstream in LPG. So we already have a ready infrastructure for LPG as auto gas. There is a bit of work that needs to be done around the use of CNG, and I believe that there is some funding available for that, but it's still a lot of gas. It's still a lot of work to be done, and I do not believe that it's necessarily a near-term solution. Right? I don't believe it's a near-term solution, and there's some other considerations that need to be made. Okay. It's more of a mid-term solution to really get it to get its adoption to the levels that we will need to really make it a viable alternative to PMS.
But okay, now you're going to the space that I wanted to ask you the question now, which is how significantly, for those who are still wary of this whole conversation around CNG, how significantly will it impact the price of petrol or the costs they will expend on energy in their homes? There are those who are already, calculating that 12.5 kilogram of gas converted for generator will only give them about 1 day, maybe a little over a day of use of the generator. How significantly will it crash the cost of energy that people use for gas, for their cars, and all of that?
I mean, I think the first thing to say is that let's deal with the reality of the fuel subsidy. Nigerians are going through a lot of hardship, and that's the reality. And so when you hear people looking at all of these various mechanisms, all these various means as alternative fuels, that's really local innovation in trying to deal with the problem that is causing them a lot of sleepless nights. In isolation, it would appear as though what we have is a very simple transportation problem, but it's not. There are so many competing policies today that are really making it difficult. So whether or not a canister of CNG or LPG takes you one night, it's really the symptom. And what we need to do as a country is really rally together, both governments, states and federal, is really to rally to a point where we are all contributing somehow to take the pain away in small doses, right? What do I mean by that? Today, we have a situation where fuel subsidy has been removed, so the cost of transportation has gone up. The cost of people getting to work every day has shot up significantly. To get a bus from Lawson to VI today is about 700 naira. That was not the case 2-3 months ago. So it's gone up. In addition to that, you have other competing fuels. Diesel, for instance, we have a 7.5% VAT increase on fuels. It's all, whilst these things may not be done to make life difficult for Nigerians, to a casual observer, it would seem as though there is an assault on their way of life and making and how they live and the cost of living. So when you see people trying to solve for something, it's because there is not a ready, viable alternative. What we must do, and really what we must do, is to make sure that things that relate to food, fuel, and transportation are really given priority today. And this is quite aside from health. Food, transportation, and fuel really need to be given very specific focus. And there are a few things that can be done in that space, right? I mean, look, we are in very difficult times. Nigerians are by nature innovative people, but we really need to take steps. I mean, food, people need to start looking at how we can help, even at a local subsistence basis, right? For gas, we need to make sure that the solution that we choose is the right one. We need to make sure that we're not creating another problem. So with CNG, let's talk about that for 2 seconds. You need a canister of several canisters of CNG to go into the back of a car. You lose boot space. What we really should be looking at is a combination of all of the energy sources. LPG is one, CNG is one. PMS is still a viable and realistic alternative. And what we're seeing in the industry today is that players are going to great lengths to try to see what they can do to bring down the cost of this product, right? To bring down the cost of this product. We're also seeing people invest in alternative, in solar, for instance. That is a very clear, ready alternative to diesel as an energy or power fuel. So we kind of need to diversify the focus and thinking in terms of what the solution is. The solution is not one thing, it's not two things. It's really being able to address all of the various pieces that go into the energy mix. And we have an abundance of sunlight. So I think there is room for electric vehicles. We have seen some states already take a bold step in mass transit EVs. That is viable. It's as viable as the conversion kits that we're talking about for CNG. It is sustainable. LPG is sustainable.
Let's see. All right, we hear you. Let's see if we can explore that a little bit as we talk about fuel subsidy. Now, we know that 2 days after the president spoke about fuel subsidy removal, the group CEO of NNPCL did say that the federal government owed it $6 billion, which is 2.8 trillion naira. And they said that was the exact amount that they had used in paying to keep the fuel cheap. Now, 2 days ago, we also did see comments coming through from NNPCL that since January 2016, no subsidy had been paid to any marketer. And that kind of confuses quite a lot of people who are looking from a distance. I mean, since you were in there, I imagine you might have come across that narrative. Could you explain to us what that meant? Because people thought that they've been paying subsidy all this while. What does that mean, really?
I mean, I'm not an economist, but I think if you follow the logic, the subsidy comes at a cost. Somebody has to bear that cost. We have been buying and consuming petrol that we as citizens have not necessarily paid for fully because we had a subsidy policy. NNPC has been the sole importer of petrol for some time now. That it follows, therefore, that they have carried the can in terms of the actual payment of the difference of the difference between the actual cost of petrol and the cost at which it was being sold to Nigerians. So there's something in that, and let's not forget. At the end of the day, we're not even talking. It's a savings we're talking about, right? It's not really real money. It's not these savings unless it's directed purposefully and properly. It's not going to necessarily save Nigerians' hardship today. It's not, and this gives me a lot of concern in terms of how we're dealing with what everyday Nigerians are going through. So yes, I mean, as a company, we many of my as a the professional association, many of my members have not necessarily fully reconciled on some of the payback that has come with our contribution to the subsidies in terms of transportation, for instance. So we have not been fully reconciled there. I know that there are discussions ongoing with the authority to make sure that that reconciliation happens. And I think at a national level, there is still a reconciliation that needs to happen. So I was a bit surprised to hear you say that there was a precise number of 6-point-something billion that had been called out, because as far as I'm aware, the full reconciliation has not happened, and therefore nobody has a precision on the numbers. And what we've really got to deal with is how are we going to support, how are we as Nigerians going to get through this hardship in the near term? Because I believe in the long term, the prospects are there. The pain we're going through now, the fuel subsidy removal, the FX unification, and hopefully we'll get crude productivity up, we'll get security dealt with, and we'll have dealt with all of the big fundamental issues that are.
Pardon me, Mr. Adeosun. So when you say you're a bit surprised about those numbers, because I just quoted directly about the NNPCL in terms of how much they say federal government was owing them, because that amount is what they say they've spent to keep it cheap. So he's saying that amount, we can't go with that amount as of yet.
Oh, I'm saying, you said, I think there was a precision about the number that I questioned.
Yeah, the right? 2.8 trillion, $6 billion.
So those as far as I'm aware, so this will be a ballpark figure. As far as I'm aware, there is still a reconciliation that needs to happen to arrive at I was just talking to the precision. There's no doubt that money is owed. At the end of the day, it's all government. It's crude, which is Nigeria's equity barrels that was used as part of the transaction. So there's a lot more going on in there that needs to be reconciled to arrive at what a precise number should be.
So is it going to be, your estimation, if you could just off the cuff, is it like higher, or will it be a lot less than this?
Oh, I really can't. I don't have enough of a broad view across the crude, the products that have been brought in, the payments that have not been made to FAC. I'm just like in terms of visibility in that regard. My concern really is around how we as an industry body can deal and support Nigerians as they go through this crisis or this economic crisis that's really impacting their day-to-day lives.
And speaking about supporting us,
business.
Yes. As we wind down on this one, many Nigerians feel that marketers or that sector takes them for a ride because of the way this just goes back and forth. Probably, if you say they don't understand it, maybe you could shed a little more light on, because we hear the government say, look, this product that is supposed to be subsidized, it's not getting to the actual people. It's not achieving the aim for which it was set out. That, number one, we're subsidizing neighboring countries. And people wonder, how can that ever be possible? Then they tell us, we don't know how much exactly we're consuming. Yet, you know how much leaves the depot, how much is landing cost, they can't exactly fathom. How do we arrive at this exact price that NNPC says, this is the band within which petrol has got to be sold? So many things that we don't understand here about what to go home with. And then to make it worse, as though adding insult upon injury, we hear rumors, maybe you could tell us, that petrol could sell for, 700 naira per litre. You heard about that, didn't you?
Oh, I've read all sorts in the papers. I picked it up in the airwaves. So, can I just take a stab at trying to set some reality around some of the things that have been said? I think, look, there's no denying it. It's a fact that Nigeria's subsidized product has made its way across our borders. That's a fact. And hopefully that is a historic fact that will still need to be looked at. The reality is that our consumption numbers have been higher than they ought to have been, right? And as a consequence, we have seen some issues at petrol stations, particularly with product availability, because we had a single importer, and also issues with supply, because there's a lot of demand that was not being met. The situation we are at today is different, right? NNPCL, as the custodian of the strategic stocks, has enough petrol to last us 30 days. That is our national backstop, our national reserves, to put it in one way. What we're going to see marketers do is marketers doing what the private sector does best, which is that they're going to compete. And in that competition, Nigerians will benefit. There are certain elements that make up the cost of a liter of oil at the pump. Some of it is fixed and some of it is variable and completely out of Nigeria's control. The ones that are fixed are things like taxes, levies, maybe some jetty costs that are prorated per volume. Those are fixed. But there are some variables which matter, which add significantly to the cost of oil or petrol delivered at pump. For instance, the floating price, that is the index price, is not within our control. That is driven by the bigger macro laws of demand and supply. There are freight charges. I'm sorry, I'm just sticking on that petrol, on that price point for a second.
Okay.
The abnormal issue in Russia and Ukraine today means that the price of crude is artificially high, and therefore its derivatives are also high. By derivatives, I mean PMS, diesel, jet fuel, all those other byproducts.
Okay.
Then you have vessels. The cost of vessels is high. And what you're going to see the private sector do today, just to bring it home, is that we're going to try to optimize. FX is a big issue as well. So FX yesterday was at 780 to the dollar. That's a price at which we will do. So what the good marketers are doing, is that we're going to try to go for turnover, import, sell, convert the price.
All right, Mr. Doshi, pardon me to jump in because we need to go, but let me just add this bit. If you could keep it as short as possible, we'll appreciate it. Number one is that we understand that no new product has come into the country, so people wonder, why are we paying for this product when we're still paying for the old stock? It's still old stock that's available. So on what basis are we paying this new price? And secondly, we never heard anything say, the byproduct of the crude that we export. Do we bring that back in this country? Nobody talks about that.
Yeah, two very good points, and I'll be brief as you have guided. The first one is that there is a replacement cost principle. So as I said to you before, as marketers, our job is to sell oil at the best price to people. It's to turn over. We're volume businesses rather than, so my company, for instance, is a volume business. We're a volume business rather than a focus on margin. We know it's up and down. Some days you win, some days you lose. But you have to take that, when you sold, you have to convert that money into something that you use to buy the next cargo. Otherwise, that cycle will break. A few of us are already in the importation business. We are really going to test the waters. We're going to take the risk to see if we can bring in products and land it cheaper than what we are currently seeing in the markets today. Now, the reality is that the variables mean that the price can go up and the price can go down. But in a free market economy, which I believe is where we are today, what you are more likely to see is a race to the bottom because people will try to outprice each other and the consumer gains. The consumer gains.
What about the byproduct before we go?
To the other point about the byproducts, it's absolutely criminal what has happened. If you take a barrel of oil today and let's say $71 per barrel, if you were to fully extract and exploit the value locally, that value, that same $71 barrel of oil will give you $2,000 in terms of value. So what we must do to address this is we must get those local refineries on stream. I know there's a lot of work going on in the background, and we're praying and hoping that those refineries come on so that we have yet another source of fuels and its byproducts. Okay. We're also expecting the Dangote refinery to come on stream. We have no line of sight to when it's going to be ready, but we pray again for the sake of Nigerians that it comes on stream very soon.
All right, we'll have to anchor at that point. Mr. Olu Adeosun, Chairman at the moment, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All right, so let's move on to the very next one. In fact, we'll continue on that same break. There's just so many things to exhaust, and so those and more. So we'll be back in just a moment and take on our very next guests. Stay on with us.
Duchess International Hospital opened its doors in October 2021. The mission of the hospital is to reverse medical tourism. We take particular care here at the Duchess to bring together a combination of the brightest and the best locally, as well as Nigerians in the diaspora who are interested in returning to do very good work for the benefit of our patients here in this country.
The good thing is that we have all international expertise here, all international facilities here, international people working here. Everything is coming together in a space which was considered not great in terms of the availability of healthcare.
Axis Bank, of course, has been able to provide us with a robust range of products and services that has enabled us to deliver that standard and quality of healthcare that is integral to our mission as an organization.
Family needs the right amount of energy to start your day, but saucing for breakfast with a splendid blend of nutritious multigrains? Big wahala. With the new Kellogg's Gold Grain cereal, you don't have to go through all of that. So now, your mornings can look like this.
Go, 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 Gold Grains. Love the goodness of its multigrains. Grain Sets Go!
Also available in banana flavor.
Breakfast time is Kellogg's time.
Organizations now operate in a rapidly changing business environment of transitions, disruptions, and ambiguity. Texam UK presents its Winning in Turbulent Times program, a 2-day executive development program that equips strategic leaders with skills to navigate dynamic business landscapes. Professor Rudi Alalin, a former advisor to the Netherlands Prime Minister, Harvard, INSEAD, and IESE visiting professor, developer of the first ATM card intellectual property, will leverage Texam's proven and impactful methodology. Date 12th to 13th July 2023. Venue Whitbaker, Ikoyi, Lagos. Cost 1,414,500 naira after discount, covering study materials, select meals, group pictures, and certificate. For further information, visit www.texam.co.uk or email exec@texam.co.uk. Call +44 7425 88 3791.
Texam, insights that inspire, actions that change the world.
During the period under review, we have recorded 16 seizures of assorted items, which include the following. Number one, 494 50 kg bags of dry blended NPK fertilizer, 14,980 liters of premium motor spirit, that is petrol, packed in drums and jerrycans, 3 vehicles, namely Toyota Starlet, 2 Toyota Corollas, that were used as means of conveying this foreign parboiled rice, 50 kg bags of parboiled rice. The duty paid value of these items, that 16 assorted seizures, stand at 22,894,723 naira. It is crystal clear that we are not relenting in our anti-smuggling drive, and we assure you that we shall pursue it aggressively within the ambit of the law in order to bring smuggling to its knees in Adamawa and Taraba states, as well as its environs.
Welcome back. Yes, indeed. Those gentlemen joining us next. Honorable Tessa Ugbo, member representing Kwande Ushongo Benue Federal Constituency. He's a member of the APC in the House. And then we'll also have Honorable Ogene Ima Ego, who is a member of the 8th and 9th Assembly, and at the moment is a member of the ECOWAS Parliament. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you. Honored to be around.
Well, we did hear some very disappointing and shocking statements from Mr. Adeosun of Momen, how, $71 of those crude that we get on the byproduct. If I fully can give us $2,000, I think, Mr. President, probably his advisors have got to bring that to his attention. They need to ask questions. What's been happening all this while? It means perhaps that industry has been doing some things that they need to answer for. But gentlemen, talking about some of these policies, if we could even just leverage on this particular focus on this oil and gas sector. Let me start with you, Honorable Ego, about the policies that the government has put in place so far and the kind of impact that it is having on Nigerians. What is your impression of it?
Well, on the oil sector, the major policies that this present government have carried out is on the issue of removal of price subsidy, oil subsidy. Of course, it's made the price of petroleum products to be very high, and it's brought a lot of, sufferings to Nigeria as it is. But my advice to Nigeria is that let us be patient, because this fuel subsidy have really brought us back. If you look at a recent statement by NNPC, they claim that even just in the last 1 month, over 400 billion naira have been saved from the fuel subsidy. And the MD of NNPC also said that over 6.something trillion naira is spent on fuel subsidy annually. Now, if these monies are saved and it goes into the federation account, the states have their own, local government have their own, federal government have their own, you see that this money will turn the economy around. No state will be able to complain again that they don't have money to pay workers' salary, no money to promote workers to increase salary, and no money to employ new people, because almost every state will get more than double what they have been receiving before. Okay. And then in terms of infrastructure, roads that are so bad that damages vehicles and lead to the high cost of transportation, there will not be enough money to fix them. So, yes, they're suffering right now, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure that within a short while, in 6 months, I'm sure the result will be very clear. And at that time, everybody can now hold his local government chairman, his governor responsible.
Okay, well, in terms of, if we could just follow up with what Mr. Adeosun did say about the question I asked him about the byproduct. Yeah. The House had several committees in the 8th and 9th, probably the 10th May. Subcommittees, committees on the downstream, upstream. And here we are, his revelation about the crude oil, the byproduct of crude that we export. Did the House ever ask questions about some of these things? How come nothing? We don't seem to benefit from that.
It's a very technical issue, and it is very good hearing from the chairman of major marketers that we can make $2 million US, 2,000 US dollars from a barrel, instead of just the $71 we're selling the barrel. It's a very good information, and I hope that the president will work on it, and I hope that the 10th Assembly, I'm happy our colleagues who took over from us are here. I hope they will look at it, because if that is possible, then we must make all efforts to see that the barrels of oil we are exporting, we get the benefit from it, and then maybe do more refining here so that the byproducts come out. It shows that we are losing so much money. So much money is being lost.
So what did the 8th and 9th Assembly do about that? Did they ask questions on this?
Well, I'm not sure we had this information. We had the upstream and downstream committees, but I'm not very sure that this information was in the National Assembly.
Okay.
But as it is, of course, I'm still living with my colleagues here very well. We'll let them know that it's an area.
And so that's the Honorable Boy is here. Yes. He's a member of the 10th, so he's got that information firsthand. Yeah. Is it something you want to leverage on?
Well, I think this information has been out there in the sector. I think the experts have always known that Nigeria can make a lot more from our crude oil in Nigeria. But because it's an economic decision, it's a decision that requires investment from private sector investment and all that. The government has not been too pushy on insisting on building local refineries and all that. But Dangote has come on stream. And obviously, he's taking advantage of all the byproducts, all the derivables from this. So he's doing the petrochemicals, he's doing aviation fuel, and all that, which are all byproducts of his crude oil refining. So I think with his coming on stream and with the new direction we have on revamping the old refineries, the 4 old refineries we've had in the country, I think we're on the right track towards closing that gap and achieving some results in that regard.
You know, from what Honorable said there about not having known that this kind of things are available to the country, and what you're saying about these it's been out there, one would wonder, what else has Nigeria lost to maybe negligence from its leadership? Let's look at the matter of value addition to all our process. Nigeria is blessed with all manner of natural resources, not just petrol. We have gold in certain parts of this country. We have precious stones. We have all manner across the country, even agricultural products that we have. But value addition is not there. So in terms of policy, what would the National Assembly be thinking about? How are they going to ensure that it's not just about we have grown agriculture, we have grown 500 acres of rice? Value. What value is Nigeria pulling from that? Nigeria, we have gold in Cross River, we have gold in Benue, gold in Niger, in Zamfara. What values can Nigeria draw from this? Can we get those mining these products to even begin to process in country?
Yeah, we failed to tap our natural resources properly. The mining sector is a gold mine just waiting to be tapped. We've discovered gold in my constituency in Benue, but there's very little mining going, just artisanal mining going on. We have to get to a point where we can mine our natural resources, process them locally, and that does several things for our economy. It creates jobs for the economy, it creates technology transfer, so we get more proficient and more professional in exploring these resources. Graduates coming out from school get to explore their skills and their talents in the mining sector and other spaces of national development. And I'm sure once we insist on investment in processing our resources here before export, we'll definitely tap more value into it. I'll give you a simple example about cocoa in Africa. Africa exports the highest amount of cocoa to the international market. And we have this cliche about we get so little from our cocoa exports, they process the chocolate and they sell back to us and making billions and billions of dollars when Africa makes so little from cocoa. But we didn't invent chocolate. So what it means is that if the international market decides that they no longer want to consume chocolates, then our cocoa here becomes useless. It becomes just our product. What are we doing with our own materials here? We're exporting raw material, we're not processing it. So if the international community decides that they're not going to buy cocoa from Africa, or they find another alternative to creating chocolate, then what do we do with cocoa? So we always put the blame on the international market, doing this, exploiting Africa, exploiting Nigeria, but what have we done? How well have we looked inwards to try to create value from the natural and God-given resources that we have in agriculture, in oil, in solid minerals, and so many other aspects of our potential that we're blessed with in Africa. And I think Africa is moving towards that direction. The new government has shown some political will, or a lot of political will to move the needle and to push things in the right direction so that we can really begin to tap from the benefits that we can derive from this.
Honorable, you're a member of the African Parliament. Yeah. ECOWAS Parliament. You've left the 8th and 9th Assembly and the ECOWAS Parliament. One would begin to say, okay, what can be done? We have the African Free Trade Agreement that Nigeria is supposed to lead, so to speak, but we're missing out a great deal because we just want to harvest and send out. We just want to pick up and send out. But in homegrown processing and value addition, can't that be sort of pushed forward in this time?
Yes, of course, because we lose it a lot. And that's why you see that Africans are very poor. West Africa, we're very poor. Nigeria, the same thing. Like you talked about cocoa, the amount we sell cocoa, if we really process it here and export it, we'll be making billions from it. And I think it's a thing that this new government needs to pursue because it will need the executive arm to work on it. Look at palm oil, for instance. Palm oil, we are the biggest producer, but then Malaysians came, took our palm seed, and today they are the highest producer. But not only that, they turn it into different things. So a ton of palm oil, for instance, they can make even 10 times more money on it than we are making on our own. So many products that are like that. Until the government sets up a committee to look at all and see how can we manufacture this. Maybe CBN can help Nigerian businessmen, get investors from abroad to do all this. But
so, sorry, if I may come in here, I mean, both of you are legislators. So one would think that you could, or you could have, since you've moved on, and you are there now. Would you be thinking, or should the legislators be thinking about how to attract investors to their constituencies instead of looking at how to move constituency projects to their constituencies? Shouldn't that be something that you can be looking towards? So you're making contacts out there because of where you are, and you're looking at how the legislature can work to give good environment and an investment environment for the investors to invest in your constituencies. Shouldn't that be something we'll be looking at?
Sorry, let me come in. In terms of the constituency, attractive projects or constituencies, everybody needs development. And if your areas are not developed, like my area, a lot of bad roads, of course, you have to cry in National Assembly, you want it to come. But constituency projects are fixed. They are fixed amount, which should be invested in all the constituency, depending upon the number of members that you have. So, like Lagos that has 24 members, maybe constituency projects that come to each constituency is less than 50 million.
I'm not saying you should jettison constituency projects. I'm saying that shouldn't this be more of a priority?
Of course.
How you, using your position, can attract investors to your constituency.
Yeah, work hand in hand with the executive arm of government. Because don't forget, we are lawmakers. When you make the laws, it is the executive arm of government that executes these laws. So, like my colleague said, there's gold in this constituency. It's a matter of also putting pressure on the executive arm of government so that they can even have an investment trip abroad to attract investors. But what the government needs to do is to give state governments more authority on the things they have. For instance, if you have gold, you have any type of mineral, they should give them a better return on it. Exploit the minerals that are in your area, and then pay tax to the federal government. But right now, as it is with oil, everything goes to the federal government. Because of that, state governors are not encouraged to invest. If you look at Zafara and Co., you will find out that the government is not really too interested. They rather collaborate with those who are illegal miners. Because if they now find them and then do proper investment, they are making a lot of money for Nigeria. The money is not going to what will come to their state, will be very little. The whole money is going to federation account. So we need to look at how funds are shared from what you get from various areas.
So, Honorable Lubo, I mean, what's going on with the gold in your constituency? Could that be part of the hidden reasons why there are clashes sometimes?
Yeah, we suspect that the gold has attracted a lot more banditry in my constituency. You know, Benue has faced this problem of banditry, of attacks, herdsmen, what have you. But there's been a recent upsurge in some of these disturbances, especially in my constituency. My constituency boundaries, Cameroon. A boundaries Cross River, a boundaries Taraba. So we were surrounded by...
I understand there's some gold in parts of Cross River as well.
There's some gold. So it's the same belt. It's the same belt that stretches down from Cross River, the Obudu Mountains, and all that whole stretch. So there's been gold discovered in that constituency. And then it has led to a lot more banditry, a lot more foreign invaders that we've observed recently coming in and setting up camp in the constituency.
They're setting up camp?
Yes, they're setting up camp. The Chinese are in there. We're seeing foreign Fulani people, Hausa, the Yorubas and all that. Investors, in their own right, have come in there, setting up camp. We're hearing of helicopters landing, on the mountains and flying, taking off and all that. And we're wondering what is really going on. There's a lot of exploration going on. Apart from just gold, there's lithium in that constituency. So what I have done since I got elected, was to do an assessment of the constituency and what we have, what are the natural resources, what are the derivables we can tap from this constituency, what are the infrastructure needs that need to be put in place, what kind of roads can we create that lead to these mining sites so that proper investments can come in. The roads are really bad. Some of the gold sites are really up the mountain, they're in the really interior areas of the constituency. So there needs to be infrastructure that create access roads to where these mining sites are. There needs to be a Nigerian-Cameroon engagement so that we can open up the international boundary with Cameroon. It's a gazetted boundary already. It has been approved, but it has been lying fallow for a very long time. So we need to develop this boundary, this border with Cameroon. We need to set up a border post. We need to set up an international market on this border and then create the access roads that lead to the international border so that trade can improve between Nigeria and Cameroon through Benue State. It's the shortest route to Yaoundé, and then to East Africa. So if we opened up the Benue-Cameroon international border, set up an international market, create access roads to the places where mining activities can go on properly and trucks can move in and mine lithium and mine gold and a lot of other natural resources we have there. I think it just takes a little bit of innovation and political will to get the government.
Just mine or processing be part of it?
Yeah, well, I was, as a private business person, I was in the battery sector. I'm an environmental consultant, so I've been involved in battery production and all that. So I know what lithium is. I was in Germany recently visiting lithium production plants. So we've put in place some mechanism to bring in investors to set up a lithium plant in our constituency, hopefully in the next few years, as time will permit, or as we can attract this investment as soon as possible.
This country is indeed blessed. Several resources everywhere. Yeah. Everywhere you turn.
The country is indeed blessed. Everywhere. But the federal government needs to encourage states to exploit resources in the area and pay tax to the center.
One of those states, let's go to Lagos now. They've got questions for you, but go ahead, guys.
Yes, thank you, Chamberlain. I'm just, also still concerned about the fuel subsidy matter, following up from Chamberlain's initial question about the disclosure by the NNPCL that it has been funding to make fuel subsidy cheap, and fuel subsidy has not been paid since 2016. So I'm wondering if we should be, content with that disclosure and just move on. Besides that, there is also a report about vessels lying on the sea due to unremitted taxes from about 2010 to 2019, and countries are supposed to purchase that are avoiding Nigeria. I'm bringing that to you now, Honorable Teze, from the Ninth Assembly. Was the Ninth Assembly aware of this, and should we be asking questions for this administration to probe such matters?
Some of those issues have just come to light. For instance, it's under this 10th Assembly that the issues of vessels who have not paid tax came up. And one wonders, why have they not been paid tax? Why have they not been followed up? But I'm aware that government is already working on it to reconcile the tax, outstanding tax, so that, the fuel we produce can be lifted. I hope that once this is solved, it will be a continuous thing, because if we produce oil here and you cannot lift the oil, of course, no income can come in, and then we'll not have money to run our budget. So I think that that issue is already being worked on. As for NNPC saying they've not paid any subsidies in 2016, well, this news they are coming up is shocking. Because if they have not, how come trillions of naira is being siphoned away every year into the coffers of those they claim are importing their fuel? Because what we can see now is that it's just a mud plus. We say 400 billion naira, which of course the federation account is going to benefit from. So if those monies have not been paid ever since, then there will need to be a probe. Government need to set up a probe. Well, I'm sure National Assembly will be hearing, set up committee to probe it so that they can know what has been happening to our money, who have been receiving it, and why you say that since 2016 it has not been you have not been paid, whereas since 2016, government have been reporting that the fuel subsidy have been consuming more money than Nigeria is spending on capital projects. So these are very serious issues that are coming up now, and obviously we know they'll be taken up.
Yeah, indeed. Honorable, but I'd like you to also weigh in on the matter and specifically tell us what the position of the 10th Assembly would be.
Well, the 10th Assembly has just started its work. We have not delved into some of the issues that have to do with tax collections and revenue streams and all that. Most members are eager to move motions on issues that affect their constituencies directly. Most of us are interested in making an impact at home in our constituencies and our people. But the government has shown interest in reforming the tax regime in terms of the tax policies. We've heard of proposals for merger of the Federal Inland Revenue, the customs, so that we can bring our revenue collection, our tax system under one umbrella, so we can know who is doing what and what is happening as regard to revenue collection, taxes, and things like that. With the government we have in place and the kind of moves that we've seen so far, the kind of proposals and the policy directions that are being put in place, I think that it's only a matter of time before we correct some of these abnormalities that have gone on in Nigeria for far too long.
Yeah, staying with you, Honorable Ugbo, and staying with the matter of taxes, looking at the manufacturing sector, for instance, there are 60 different taxes that they have had to pay, they're looking to this administration for its commitment that those taxes will be reviewed. If we were to, significantly shore up gross domestic product, we'll have to look at those taxes. What would be the proposition of the 10th Assembly, if 15-year moratorium can be given to international oil companies and, the wherewithal is given to, those foreign and bigger investors? Shouldn't we begin to look at, local investors as well, the manufacturing sector, to enable them to thrive?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a lot more manufacturing activities going on. It's important to have a lot more manufacturing companies going on, both for local consumption and for export, than to squeeze the few industries we have in the country for taxes. So having 60+ taxes just to try to get as much as possible from these companies might not be too good and hasn't been too good for our industrialization in the country. What we need to do is to lower taxes as much as possible, create ease of doing business so that more industries come to the country, create opportunities for investments to thrive in the country, create infrastructure to the point where investments can go, mining can go on, our natural resources can be explored, markets can expand, agriculture can expand. Once we create the necessary infrastructure to expand the industrial base of the country, expand the trade and commercial base of the country, then there'll be no need to tax the little companies we have so much and extract, almost like taxing them to death. We need to let them breed. They're creating jobs for the country. They're creating, adding to our GDP and all that. So it's important that we look at these issues very well. And I'm sure the 10th Assembly, made up of very vibrant legislatures this time around, will be interested in looking at some of these issues and putting some kind of policy direction on how the government of President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu can move forward in this direction and help to ensure that companies want to come to Nigeria and operate and not want to leave the country as it has been in the past for so long. It
seems the president has popularized a completely new clause now, let the poor breathe, and it seems that the world is taking a completely different life, in recent time, Honorable Ugbo. But let me come to you, Honorable Ego, Ogene Ego. I want to... My question is a little difficult, but perhaps maybe tricky, but by way of just challenging our patriotism. I'm looking at the Constitution right now, and it starts, "We, the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, having firmly and solemnly resolved to live in unity and harmony as one indivisible and indissoluble sovereign nation under God, dedicated to the promotion of inter-African solidarity," and all of that. And that says, "to provide for a constitution for the purpose of promoting the good government and welfare of all persons in our country on the principles of freedom, equality, and justice, for the purpose of consolidating the unity of our people." Do you think all Nigerians agree with this? I ask that question in the light of the level of patriotism, or a lack of it, in our country today. From what you see, especially starting with the National Assembly, where we have the largest number of people who gather from time to time from the various parts of the country, do you think there is a mutual understanding of the meaning of patriotism and not just of segmented interests when we gather in the National Assembly?
Yes, I think there's an enormous amount of patriotism in the House. For instance, there are times we debate some very issues that affect the nation and other part of the country. And then while everybody wants to bring the interests of his area in, at the end of the day, we come to a consensus. So, you know, National Assembly is a place where patriotism reigns. But on the country generally, you find out that, you know, when a country is not able to take good care of its citizens, patriotism will be less. You know, for instance, if you're an American or British, you're very proud to be because you know that if there are issues that affect you, even outside the country, your country will come to your aid.
Well, Honourable, just 1 second on that particular matter, if you can hear me. Let me ask Honourable Egbo the same question, but perhaps in a different light. Because the issue for me, Honourable Tessa, is that as Honourable Ogana is saying right now, the members of the National Assembly seem to have a consensus. But when it comes to the rest of the country, people seem to have those segmented interests, those interests of religion, ethnicity, and all those things, and anything that comes from government seems to be taken with a pinch of salt by the people. So in that light, do you think we all have a mutual understanding and agreement about the meaning of patriotism and faithfulness to the fatherland as opposed to our pecuniary interests?
Well, you know, just like my senior colleague mentioned, when there are too many people chasing too few resources, then there's a tendency for patriotism to go down because everybody needs to survive. So it becomes a matter of survival first before patriotism. If there were systems in place where the average citizen knows that his life is protected, he knows that his security is guaranteed, he knows that he has social cover, he knows that education is protected, he knows that he can find a job and feed himself every single day. He knows he can walk out, into the community and find something to do and feed himself. Then there's no need for the lack of patriotism. Patriotism improves. And of course, when your country does things that improves your lives, when your country takes taxes from you and utilizes those taxes in a way that you can see and is transparent and is justifiable and equitable, then the patriotism goes up. The National Assembly has a full dose of patriots. I don't think there's anybody who has been president or governor or a member of the National Assembly in this country who does not wish well for Nigeria, because we're all part of this system. We all want this country to work and to survive, So we're highly patriotic. We're looking out for our individual interests as it relates to our communities and our constituencies. But of course, we're also looking at the national interest and how we can harmonize all our interests into one big basket and then build this national cake, build the economy of this country. It's far too small. And as long as it remains the way it is, as long as Nigeria keeps to grow at the little percentages that will grow every year, it will take us the next 100 years to industrialize and catch up with the industrial community. So I think there needs to be a lot more to be done. The National Orientation Agency needs to do a lot more. The NYSC needs to be reformed in a way that begins to inculcate this patriotism in our youth so that as they get older, there's a new vision for them, there's a new dynamism in the way they think. Maybe we need to change our national anthem. We need to do things that inspire people more in this country, and I hope it's just a matter of time before we get it right.
It would be good to see you take that zeal and zest to the National Assembly, such that perhaps that coming through may just give Nigerians some sort of, what they're looking for. It's your first time in the House anyway, so how's it feeling so far for you?
Well, it feels good. It's a learning process for most of us. We're mostly first-time members, but we're learning very fast. The old members in the House are setting a good direction for us. Everybody's eager to contribute, eager to say something, eager to be heard, because we want to make an impact in our communities. We're a lot of young members this time around, so everybody's vibrant and everybody's hoping to achieve a lot. There's a lot of expectations on us, and I think we're going to have a good 10th Assembly.
Okay, we'll look forward to that. Honourable Tessa Ugbo is a member representing Kwande Ushongo Benue Federal Constituency, is a member of the APC. Honourable Ogene Ima Ego was a member of the 8th and 9th Assembly. Is currently a member of ECOWAS Parliament. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on today. And all the best to both of you.
Thank you very much.
Honored to be around. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll have some messages. This one comes from Lemmy. He talks about fuel subsidy removal. He says, we've argued back and forth on the fuel subsidy removal subject matter. No one seems to know what the government is doing. One fundamental thing that must be done is revamping and refurbishing our 4 refineries for production purposes. If nothing is done in this direction, the poor will continue to suffer untold hardships and become poorer than ever.
Okay, this is the one solution to criminal activities from Ayodeji Ayodele, and it says the problem in Ebonyi and our northeast can be resolved very easily. Intelligence operations. DSS and military intelligence should be embedded massively in the regions to identify the masterminds and drivers. Information gathering should rely heavily on locals who know the corners and who's who. Thereafter, appropriate operatives should pick them up like fish out of water. If DSS is understaffed, they should recruit. And if, rogue elements cannot be more powerful than the state. A criminal is a criminal. They should pay the price and do the time. Ayodeji Ayodele.
All right, so there you go. That is the show today. We do thank you all for watching. We'll see you again next time. I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.
I'm Neo Taigbe. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Just a reminder, let the poor breathe. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Koka.
Especially my compatriot in the southeast. Let them live. Have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.